Whoa, well, howdy folks. Welcome to Mower Mike's, and I have got a doozy of a video for you today. Today we are rebuilding the Briggs and Stratton 15 horse vertical shaft engine, the most common engine ever used on riding lawnmowers. And this is the full version. Now I've taken this video and I've broken it down in different segments for oil seals, head gasket, piston rings, but this one brings it all together so that we're going to do step by step, do a full engine rebuild. I know, you're excited. So we're going to start by pulling the head off. We're going to replace the head gasket. We're going to pull the oil pan off, replace all the oil seals in there. We're going to pull the piston out. We're going to replace the piston rings. We're doing everything. We're even going to set the valve lash in this video. So I'm excited because this is by far the most extensive video we have ever shot here at Mower Mike. I'm talking about 39 different segments spliced together. We got different camera angles. We're going vertical, inverted. I've got different lighting. We brought in this Buddhist guy from Bollywood, this Indian dude, to help me direct. I mean, this is going to be some prime shop engine videotaping. So strap in, get ready, and let's go ahead and zoom in and start pulling this head off. So let's have some fun, folks, and get dirty. All right, we've got a great shot of the little Briggs and Stratton engine. Now, before we start taking it apart, I just want to note that I always like to work on a clean engine, especially when you're getting around the head and pulling off actual engine parts. So what I've done, which I always do, pressure wash the entire engine and get all the grime and grit off it so you're working from a clean surface. Now, your first step, you're gonna have to take your top off. So that's all this plastic stuff up here. It's pretty simple on these motors. You got 2 bolts here, 2 bolts there. They're all 3/8. Slide it off like so. And next, what we need to do is get the carburetor off, because this is your head. This is the part we're gonna pull off. You're gonna have an intake here, exhaust here. So it's pretty simple, especially once you have all of your, especially when it is not in the lawnmower. So let's see what we're gonna do. These are just 3/8 inch bolts. Zip them off. Try not to lose your bolts. And that is it. And make a note of the way your connections go on the carburetor. Really, you could probably, well, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and take them off just so it makes it easier. Figure I know how to do this by now. Come on, there we go. That one, and then the little choke one right there. All right, so carburetor is off, so we've got access there. And then you're going to come around to your exhaust. So there's gonna be a couple bolts there. Take your exhaust off, already done that. And next, let's go ahead and rip the valve cover off. Oh, I love working on these engines. They're so amazingly simple. Let's see. All right, looks like somebody used a lot of pookie on this valve cover. So, wow. All right, that is not what you want to do. You always want to use a gasket, not a lot of silicone like I did. So let me go ahead and I'm gonna have to whack this thing off, and then we're gonna take a look at what's underneath that valve cover. Well, I finally pried off that valve cover, and so now we're gonna talk about the valves. Now, I'm gonna suggest you take these valves off and the push rods off. There may be a way to take this head off with leaving these valves on here, but I'm just gonna go ahead and take them off. Now, don't worry about your valve lash setting. We're gonna go through that when we reinstall the valves. So go ahead and take that off, take your valve off, and make sure to have somewhere clean to put them, which I do not. And then take your push rods out. And when you take your push rod out, there is a common problem where looks like this one's the intake valve is aluminum. And the intake push rod is aluminum on this one, which a lot of times that causes that push rod to bend. So I've got a whole separate push rod video for Briggs and Stratton that shows you that you can just replace the aluminum push rod with a steel one. You can see right there, that one's more shiny because it's probably aluminum and it's much lighter. It's a good idea just to kind of roll it, find a flat, clean surface, not like my dirty plywood here. Just roll it and make sure they are perfectly straight. If not, just go ahead and get yourself a new push rod. And all you got to do, just measure the length of them. I'll go ahead and measure the length of these. We'll post them down below. All right, so we got the push rods out. And it looks like I don't see any head bolts underneath there. So what we're gonna do next, we're gonna remove the head bolts. It looks like I got, I don't know, 8 of them or so. And let me find a wrench, hang on. Boy, we're making some progress now. We have got the rocker arms. Yes, those are not valves, I know. We got the rocker arms off, push rods out. And so next we need to take off the actual head bolts. Now it looks like there's about 8 of them. And they're all 3/8. And when you take off head bolts, don't go ripping them with a power anything. Just take your time and loosen them up slowly. Don't even loosen them all the way. Loosen about half and then do kind of a crisscross shape across the different bolts, because you have to remember these heads are aluminum. They're bolted to aluminum, and the last thing you want is for anything to bend. So just work your way slowly and you'll get them loosened up. Around like here. So let me go ahead and do that, and we'll just skip my very slow wrenching part. All right, let's take off the last head bolt. Look at that, miracle of TV. You skip all the boring parts. All right, so let's go through. Before we start whacking this thing to get it off, we want to make sure we've got all the head bolts off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Count them, 8 off. Okay. Now, it should be fairly loose where you can push it off. Sometimes I like to use a dead blow hammer to press it off, but you should really never have to use pry bars on this, because remember, it is aluminum. So let me just, yeah, this one. All right, it slid right off. All right, so that is one head off of here. And now, if we look down here, next you're gonna go ahead and try to peel off the gasket the best you can. See, this one's coming off. Oh my gosh, there's so much dirt. Again, it is always good to pressure wash, especially around these fins. Apparently, even though I pressure washed this engine, I didn't pressure wash good enough. So let's see, get that off. And next, let me get some tools to figure out how we're going to get this head gasket off to make a nice, pretty surface. All right, that's Scotch right. Tore it up. Just a couple of notes on this. When you do this, you really do want to try to stay as clean as possible. Go ahead and shove an old sock or something down that hole there to keep any of this gunk off your lifters. And then once you're like this, go ahead and use some carb cleaner. I got the gum out here. Don't use WD-40 or any type of lube on this, because you don't want to interact with your actual engine oil. You can see right there, that cleaned it up real nice. Look at that. So we've got a good flat surface here. I got a little more cleaning left for the head gasket. All right, so on the cylinder head, just like the jug, you want to make sure this is super clean and has no residue or anything on it. I went ahead and already hit it with the Scotch-Brite, and she cleaned it up real nice. Now, but you can see on here on the curved surfaces, you can't really get those Scotch-Brites in there. And I want to try a new tool. I got these funky little things. They're like some sort of sanding wheel thing, and I was curious how they would do in a head. Let's see here. Well, it looked like they cleaned it up a little bit, but I tell you what, if you really want to go the extra mile with your cylinder head, where you want to lap the valves, you want to clean all the crap off here, I'm going to put a cylinder head video down below that will just blow your socks off with the humor and the knowledge. It is just fantastic. But for the basics, you want to make sure this is clean, and you want to make sure just clean out all the gunk and the surfaces. Make sure that gasket surface is clean. Make sure your exhaust surface is clean. All these I've got to work on. But again, when you're engine building, taking pieces of an engine apart, make sure it is all super clean, which is why we're going to move back over to the piston. I've got a little trick for you. Hang on. So you can see right there, we've got the piston at top dead center, but since we did so much cleaning, there's a lot of gunk built into that edge right there, and you really don't want that on there. So go ahead and turn it just a bit, and look, you can see that gunk built up on the edge. And what you can do is take a very clean rag and just go around the edge of it and take it off. See that? And it just gets, that's a good way to get the gunk off that lip right there. And go ahead and make sure that is super, super clean. And then go ahead and bring your piston to the bottom and go ahead and put a little bit of engine oil around the cylinder and make sure all of that is really, really clean. So, all right, enough of the close-ups. I know that's fantastic. So, all right, stay with me. We've got the cylinder head clean. We've got all this stuff clean. So the next step, we are going to... All right, folks, we've got a great shot looking at the bottom of the engine. Now, as I stated before, I've already pulled the heads off. So what we need to do, we need to remove, essentially like an oil pan on a car. This whole piece should pop off. And that way we can get to the rod and unhook the piston. All right, so you're gonna see a bunch of big bolts here, 13 millimeters. Now these 3 little bolts, if you have these, that's your oil pump. You do not need to mess with that unless you're just curious what's underneath there. So I'm gonna go ahead and start ripping. I've got the big boy here because these bolts are freaking tight on here. So just go around, and there's a lot of bolts here, folks. Now we are having a good time, I tell you what. Now, if you're just trying to do this with your wrench, you really need a power wrench to make sure that sucker doesn't start spinning on you. There we go. Let's go ahead and yank all these bolts out and try to put them somewhere where you're not going to lose said bolts. Because you got a bunch of them, but at least these are all the same size. We got one hanging there. You always got one hang around there. All right, so we got those off. Next, we've got to get off this thing here. Now, all right, it looks like it's gonna pop off fairly easy. Couple whacks. Wow, that worked way better than I ever planned. All right, now be easy, and it is always a good thing to make sure your engine is clean before you do this. And what have we got there? We got ourselves some parts. All right, I'm gonna do a little research because this here, what we're looking at, this is your oil splasher, I believe, camshaft. All right, before I say anything else stupid, let me get my bearings together and we'll come back. All right, now we are looking down into the bowels of the Briggs and Stratton mighty engine. So what we're going to do next is that we're going to replace this camshaft. That's a little one, camshaft, crankshaft. And we got a couple parts laying on top of it. First, if you did it the wrong way like I did, you'll notice this extra part, this keyed shaft. What this is the oil pump shaft. And if you remember earlier, I told you do not take off the oil pump cover. Well, that was completely wrong. You should take off the oil pump cover and replace this shaft. I'll show you that when we put the cover back on, but let's just put that aside for now and knock that up 2 mistakes. All right, so next we've got the old oil slinger, and the way this works is that, here, let's get a little closer, a little zoomer-in. Look at that. All right, so that's your oil shaft. You'll see it's got a shaft, an oil slinger. It's got a shaft that butts up right against there. And folks, real simple, just pull that sucker out. There we go. We'll worry about that guy later. And now we've got the camshaft, and it's real easy. You'll see right there, we got a couple timing marks. Just pull it straight out. Try not to knock anything. And voila, we got the camshaft. Now, these things do go bad quite a bit, specifically the compression release. And that's what this thingy is here. And there's a lot smarter people online that explain it. But essentially, while it's starting, it's at slow speed. And this thing is kept against here. And so when it's spinning, it's got a little bump. And what that does, that bumps up the intake valve just a touch to release some compression and allow it to spin easier with the starter. And then once she starts blowing and going, the centrifugal force opens this up and closes that and gets rid of that little nub. And what happens a lot of times, this thing will break, shatter, and you will lose it. So if you need a new camshaft, I will put the Briggs and Stratton camshaft link down below. I have heard some horror stories about the Amazon camshafts So I'll put one of those two down below. All right, so if you're just looking at the camshaft video, we're to go ahead and replace that. But if you're more bold and we're doing the piston ring video, we're gonna dive even deeper into this sucker in the next cut. So stay with me. All right, folks, let's take a look inside the engine, and don't be scared, all right? I know it's a lot of parts, but I'm here to hold your hand. All right, first thing you notice is a big old chunk of metal right there. What that is a counterbalance system. We are not going to touch that because we do not need to touch it. All right, so what we're after, you're gonna look up here through the cylinder. That is your rod, your push rod, and that connects to a main bearing cap right there on the crankshaft. And what we need to do, we need to unbolt this. The bottom piece is gonna come off, and then we'll be able to push that push rod up through the top, and voila, piston's gonna come out as long as you have your head off. Now, I've tried some different angles because when this thing rotates, it's gonna pull all the way back here, and there's just not much room for a wrench. So what I've had to do, you'll see I've rotated it all the way against the far wall, and that's gonna give me room to get my wrench in here. So what I do, I got a little short extension, a T40 Torx bit, and then we're gonna slide it underneath here like so, and hopefully we'll be able to wrench it off. Now, since I am a one-man show, I'm gonna have to remount this camera, and we'll see if I can actually get it off this time. Stay with me. All right, we are set up. Now, to give myself maximum space and make sure I don't ding these suckers up, I'm pulling my lifters out. You just slide them out right there. And what these are, this is the little flat piece rides on your camshaft, and it goes up and down, and it pushes up your push rods. I'm sure I just called that a push rod. All right, I got my lingo wrong. I'll go back to my Encyclopedia Engines and correct myself. All right, forget all that. All right, so let's get off this main bearing cap. So I'm just lined up underneath here, and we're gonna try to, it's all about angles, because you sure as hell don't want to strip one of these suckers off of here. All right, come on, come on. All right, I got a good seat in there, and I'm just gonna hang on, folks. Come on. God, dog, that sucker is tight. Huh. All right, well, I guess we'll keep on trying. I'm really worried about breaking something. All right, so I'm going back in here. Sometimes 2 times is a charm, right? I'm sure you're getting lots of shot of just my... This wrench is such a piece of junk. Look, it don't even snap. Golly. You'd figure I had some better tools here at Mower Mike. All right, we got another contact. All right, we loosened that one up. That was a little scary, I'll tell you that much. Now we're gonna go around for the other side and see if I can't get this sucker to come off. All right, you see right there, I got the angle on her. See if I got enough room. I do not. Try a little shorter one. It's always good to have lots of different sizes extensions in the shop. All right, perfect, perfect. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and crank on it. Try to hold it as straight as possible. What in the world? That one came off super easy. So, I don't know. I guess they had 2 guys install this thing at the old Briggs and Stratton factory. No, all right, well, I'm gonna stop wasting your time. I'm gonna go ahead and unscrew these 2 bolts, and then we'll get a close-up of me actually pushing this push rod out of the engine. All right, got those 2 bolts out off the main bearing cap, off the connecting rod. Yes, I called it a push rod earlier. I was mistaken. Please don't leave comments and be one of those jackasses. All right, so what we're gonna do, we'll pop that thing off. Let's see. It should just slide right off like so. Like so, I said. All right, got it off. And now you should be able to just push this thing up, push the connecting rod up. Let me see here. And when you push it up, it'll slide right up the piston bore. So let me go ahead and loosen it up and we'll get a shot of it coming out of its hole. All right, stay with me. Hi folks, grab your hot toddy and whatever you're drinking and strap in for the money shop because we are gonna push this piston out of the engine. So all you do, like I said, you push on, whoa! I did not plan on it flying out. That is not the correct method, but she was ready to come out. All right, so you see the piston here? It's actually not too dirty. I'm gonna go ahead and clean it up. Take the old, we're gonna clean it up a little bit. And next what we're gonna do, we're gonna zoom in on the bore and start prepping it for some new piston rings. Wow, well that was a little more exciting money shot than I planned on, so stay with me, who knows what will happen next. Okay folks, we've got the piston out of the cylinder and now we're gonna do some really cool engine building stuff. So what we need to do now is actually prep the cylinder because you don't want to just throw new piston rings on there right off. You've got to do a couple of steps here. Because if you look at the cylinder wall, you're going to see it's got kind of a sheen to it. And also there's some very small scratches here, but they're pretty much worn off. What we need to do is hone the cylinder. And what that's going to do, that's going to take that sheen off there. And also it's going to put some new cross hatches in there, which are just little tiny cuts, scratches essentially, that go on the inside of the cylinder, and it's going to allow the new piston rings to set in there and really seal. Because if you go like this, that cylinder is already too slick, it's not going to seal to the new piston rings. In order to do that, what I've got here, look at that guy. This here is a flex hone. They're really handy, they're on Amazon. And what you do, you buy one of these guys and you slide in there and you turn it super fast and it goes in circles, and these are little cutting balls. And they're gonna make little scratches all the way up and down the cylinder, which is gonna hone your cylinder. And it's really good for home mechanicking. Before you do this, you do need some honing oil. You know, Flex Hone has their own honing oil. I found some of this, knife blade oil. Essentially an oil. You don't wanna use motor oil because it clogs up your actual cutting little balls. Do some sort of honing oil to spray in there and get her lubed up before you start cutting. Again, I'll put all the details down below. I did a whole separate video going through a lot more detail on prepping the cylinder also, which I'll put down below. So let me go ahead and get set up and we'll hone her out real quick and then slap in some new piston rings. All right, let's get the honing cylinders. Now, first thing, I suggest shoving some sort of towel or something down behind here at the base of the cylinder because you really don't want whatever is being honed out to fall into the rest of your engine. So don't use an old shirt like I'm doing. Probably better to use a towel, but that'll work. All right, so to actually hone the cylinder, you've got your flex hone here. And when you buy one of these, you want to get one that's maybe a quarter or a half inch larger than your actual cylinder. You can see this one's a little small, but it's what I got. And then you're gonna hook it on your DeWalt drill. And you're just gonna do a slow, steady motion in and out, a few different passes, and let's see how it goes. All right. See, I'm having to kind of round mine because my flex hone is too small. All right, there we go. Now we're getting somewhere. That's too cool. See, folks, it doesn't need a whole lot. Let me go ahead and zoom in and show you what we've honed out here. Hopefully I don't drop my... All right, let's look at that cylinder wall. Just after that, look at what a change it is. We've gotten rid of that sheen on there, and we've got some great cross hatching on here. Looks like I probably should have gone a little faster because you really want those cross hatches, but that'll work. She's all scratched up pretty good and ready for a new piston, at least for an amateur mechanic like myself. So, all right. So I'm gonna get this cleaned up. I'm just gonna use some carb cleaner on it just to clean out any type of grit that's left over from the honing. And then we are going to look at piston rings. All right, so we got our pretty cylinder all cleaned up. Next, I'm going to show you a way that you can test to see if your piston rings really are bad. Yeah, you've got to get this deep into her to understand if the piston ring's bad. Now, the piston ring, I've got the old one pressed in here. What they do is they seal around the piston to the cylinder, keeps the compression in, and as it goes up and down millions of times, eventually it wears out and it makes it thinner and thinner and thinner. Now, a way to test whether or not your piston ring still has enough metal and girth in her is that they test a thing called the piston ring end gap, which is the very end of the piston ring. See that little tiny gap right there? That's where it comes together. Now, as the piston ring gets more and worn out, it pulls apart further and further where that gap gets fatter and fatter. So if you go into the official book, yep, I got the official book. So you've got different piston ring end gaps. So for the top piston ring, which this one is, the ring gap should be 0.006 to 0.01. And to measure it, you push it down, and you can try it at different parts of the cylinder. I've got it pushed down maybe an inch or so, and I can fit a 0.0, look at that, 0.017. So that's almost twice the ring gap that we're looking for. So you can definitely tell this one is worn out. When I tested the new top piston ring gap, it was closer to 0.005, which falls within tolerance. So there is some wear on the cylinder, but this is a really good test to not only test whether your old one's worn out, but also when you test your new one, you'll be able to test to see to make sure there's not too much wear on the cylinder. And at this point also, you can measure the cylinder. There's different measures that you can do within the cylinder. It takes a few more tools to measure that out versus just a feeler gauge. So I like the ring gap. It's real simple. So with that, now we are going to move on and we're going to start assembling piston rings on the piston. So now we're gonna have to start some I'm gonna start having some real fun now. Stay with me. All right, so next we're going to play with piston rings. Now the first thing you need to do is take the old piston rings off. All you do is you find the little gap. Oh, and a lot of times they're gonna break because these things are pretty brittle after the beating they've had. So you're gonna have two rings up top. These are your two compression rings. Then down on the bottom part here, you're going to have what they call oil rings. And it should be, like on this one, you're gonna have two super skinny ones. And then you're gonna have a kind of a wavy one there, and that's what keeps the oil where it's supposed to be. All right, we got those two off, and then the little guy, well, it's some trouble. Sometimes you need a K-bar to help you out with a tool. Look at that, works great. All right, so now that we've got the rings off, what you need to do, you need to clean this very thoroughly. You need to clean the piston, clean the ring grooves, make sure all of that is clear, because when we put the new ones in, they need to be loose and be able to slide around. So what I do, just take some carb cleaner and a wire brush and just go in there and just really give it a good cleaning. I suggest carb cleaner and not WD-40, because WD-40 is a lube, but it's a different type of lube than oil, and you don't want that on your new rings because they won't set in right. So, all right, well, I'm gonna clean this sucker up and get her nice and pretty, and then we're gonna put on the new piston rings. All right, look how pretty we get that piston. Just a little carb cleaner and elbow grease. She cleaned up real nice. Now, a little pro tip, if you want to really get in there, especially in this top ring groove, just take a chunk of the old piston ring, go in there, and it makes the perfect cleaning tool, because you can go around, you can feel the rough spots, really get in there and make sure it's all cleaned out. And most of your grit is going to be in the top ring, because that's where all the carbon hits, the boom boom action happens. Now at this point, I'm just going to replace the piston rings, but if you wanted to replace the piston, this is the point to do it. In order to take the piston off, there's a little piston pin in there. You pull it out, you can get a little sharp pick or needle or something, pull that out, and then pull the piston pin out. It's gonna slide through your rod here, and then just slide the new one on. Now when you're buying your piston, just make sure, you can see once I cleaned it up, I actually can see the piston number on there, and it says STD, that means standard size, and then you can buy it based on whatever oversize or standard that you need. Sometimes these pistons get beat up because they are aluminum, or you might want to go with a bigger size because your cylinder's worn out. All right, so we've got that covered. Next, let's talk piston rings. Now, if you've watched my channel at all, you know I am big on pushing the cheap crap on Amazon, all the Chinese carb kits and everything else. But when it comes to things like head gaskets, engine gaskets, pistons, piston rings, rods, I always want to go with the OEM because they're so much harder to replace. It's not like a carburetor you can just swap on and off. We're in this sucker pretty deep. So I went ahead and just got the original Briggs and Stratton piston rings. Was able to get these on Amazon. I'll post a link below to the ones I've got. There's the part number. Now a lot of these ring sets will cover all sorts of different pistons. Just do your own research. All right, so we got our piston rings. You're gonna have some skinny ones, you're gonna have some fat ones. Now, first thing we're gonna look at is the fat boys. Now, just don't go swapping on piston rings right off. It comes with some instructions, and you're gonna see some color coding on them. If you look here, you can see one has one stripe, one has two stripe. The ring with one stripe is the top ring. We can install these. Yeah, and the two stripe is the center ring. So we're gonna put the center ring on first. And also, I want these stripes to the right. So don't put it on this way, put it on this way. So that's gonna be your center ring. I always like to put a little lube in here just for extra assurance. I like the Max Tough purple. This is a Simply lube, so it's gonna be a little thicker than your regular lube, but any type of oil, whatever. Just kind of throw a little lube in there, get things sliding around. Now, you can get special tools for this stuff, but really, these are piston rings. Installing them, they are not that hard. You just want to make sure to get it in the right ring gap. Not that one. Come on down one more. There we go. And it should just go ahead and slide down in that sucker. Come on. All right, I know this is very riveting. There we go. And you'll be able to feel it once you're in there. And that little lube action is going to help you out a lot. So you can see we got our two stripes to the right. Now let's take the next one striper to the right. And this one should be a little easier. One thing you'll notice is that these piston rings are much thicker and stiffer than the ones you took off. Because one thing people don't realize, once you run an engine long enough, piston rings are a wear item. It's like doing maintenance every 600 hours or so. All right, so we are set. We can see those two guys. Those are the easy ones to slide in. Next, we've got to do the oil one. And the way these are set up is that you're going to have a real skinny one up top, a real skinny one on the bottom, and then in between the two, you're going to have an oil ring. And this is what keeps them in there. So it's going to look like that on the actual piston. So what I like to do is, again, get you a little lube in there. Lube makes everything better, folks. All right, I'll go ahead and do a skinny one, and these don't have any colors or any fanciness like the big fatties do. And slide that guy on there, and just don't go yanking on these suckers. They are pretty sensitive, and if you're smart, you would install this one first instead of last, so you don't have to pull it over the others. All right, so you can install that guy, and then you're going to install your other one, and that one's just going to slide around. Just make sure to put it on top of that one. Slide it around, slide it around, slide it around. There we go. That worked out better than planned. I think it's in there. Just make sure it's all the way in there, all the way around. These are tricky, folks. Trust me. You just got to play with them for a while. Eventually, they will get in there, like so. All right, see, we've got that top one. Now we need the last one to go on the very top. And this is always the trickiest one. Don't hit your camera while you do it. And do not cut yourself on your giant Marine Corps knife. All right. There we go. Again, don't do as I do. Install the oil ring first. This one last. You can see we're coming around. Oh my gosh, it's lost in there. I'm not going to bore you with this. I'm going to go ahead and do this, and we'll show you the final result. All right, I got them all on there. As you see, this is what it's supposed to look like. You got one, the oil ring, then your other skinny one, and your 2 rings up top. One thing, just to make sure, again, make sure your marks are to the right. And also, your piston ring gaps, make sure you stagger them. You don't want these stacked on top of each other, because that is not going to be good for compression. So I've got this one gap here, and then just make sure the other one is, you know, a quarter way around the piston. All right, how much fun was that? Whew. All right, now I think it is time to slide this piston into her home so we can finally make some horsepower and I can get to cutting yards. All right, stay with me. All right, folks, we're back to the main engine. And before we go any further, we need to go ahead and clean the engine gasket that's stuck on the main engine casing. This is very, very important. It's a little more of a delicate procedure than looking at the oil pan, because the oil pan was off the engine. Here we don't have a chance or a choice to pull this off. So what I suggest, if you're replacing camshafts or anything like that, before you put those items back in here, go ahead and clean it up. And I suggest cleaning the gasket off first and then clean out what you can on the inside of the motor. Now, I suggest using the same methods as we did before. I'll go ahead and peel off what I can, then scrape off. But it's very important to try to keep the gunk out of the motor the best you can. So what I suggest is using as many towels as you can to stuff around the edges like so. And then come in with whatever your gasket scraping tool is. And you know my preferred choice is the drill. And what I'll do, I'll put it turning right so it shoots the gasket the most it can on the out, and then just go ahead and clean up the gasket the best I can. So I know some of you are into watching gasket cleaning, but I'm not going to film the gasket cleaning and waste your time. So I'm going to go ahead and clean up this gasket, and then we'll go back to the next step. So stay with me. All right, folks. Now is the time to start getting excited, because the next step, we are going to slide the piston back into the engine. But before we start pushing and prodding, I want to make sure we are prepped. So first thing, make sure you've got all the gaskets cleaned off the side of the engine, because we don't want to be cleaning gaskets and getting stuff onto new parts that are clean and shiny. Next, make sure your crankshaft journal, where the rod connects, is at the bottom of the engine. I can see down there where my finger is. You don't want it rotated up. So if it's up here, just turn 180 and make sure that's on the bottom to give us the most possible room. All right, next, very important, lubrication. Now we want to lube everything. We want to lube inside of the cylinder. We want to lube the journal down here where anything touches. We want to lube around the piston itself. And what I use, I like the Royal Turple Max Tough assembly lube. This is an engine assembly lube. It's a little thicker than your regular lube. Just for assembling motors, you can use regular 10W30, whatever. Just make sure to use something. So, all right, so we're getting ready. Now look at your piston, and on the top of the piston, there's going to be an arrow. Now you want that arrow pointed towards the big rusty flywheel, so that's going to point that way. And something else you're going to notice, you got all these piston rings. It ain't going to slide, just slide on in there like butter. No, 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 no. We need a tool, and I've been going through tools trying to figure out the best one to use. Before I use this one, which uses a pair of pliers, and you put these clamps around the piston rings, it did not work in this application for whatever reason. So now I have got a small engine piston ring compressor. And what it does, you slide this sucker in here, and then you compress it. Like so. It's just like a big, gigantic clamp. Oh, let's see here. Oh. Okay, sorry, I'm making everybody dizzy. Maybe if I do it right there. There we go. This thing is sharp, I tell you what. Use my new rag here. All right, and just make sure it's fairly close in there. And also, before you start compressing, double check the rings to make sure all the rings are going to slide into their correct homes. You don't want any rings just hanging out. And make sure it's pretty dang tight. You can see right there. I've got about as tight as I can do. And then you're going to slide it over here like so. And then, in theory, we should be able to just whack her down in there and it should slide straight into the engine. Now, when you start whacking, don't go just using a metal hammer, no. Use something soft. You can use the wooden part of a hammer, or if you have a soft blow hammer like so. So keep your fingers crossed. Hope to God this works this time. Come on. God damn, look at that. It went in there. All right, so we've got the piston in here. All the rings are compressed. Now they're pressing against the side. We've got good lubricant. All right, so we're going to move to the next spot. I will list all my tools I have used with the ring compressor. That is an awesome ring compressor for this application. One thing to stress, make sure that you don't have lube on your mating surface where your head gasket is going to go. You do not want that, but you want lube inside the engine. All right, now let's flip this motor over, and then we're going to strap the rod on the crankshaft. And I swear we're getting close. Stay with me. All right, so next we're going to connect the connecting rod to the crankshaft. All you do, it takes a little wiggling, but make sure to line it up right there where it sits flush on the journal, which is the bearing part right there. Put your cap back on, hand thread in the threads, and then you're going to torque them down. Now, per the book on my engine, it's 100 inch-pounds, which is not much torque. Some of the engines, the horizontal engines, take up to 150. So make sure to check your torque settings. And when you torque them, go ahead and torque the one closer to the piston first. That's what it says in the manual. That's a new one on me. So yeah, just torque it down. Again, it's not much torque at all. Get that one, and then go ahead and get your other one. Now, when you torque these down, you're going to notice there's not a whole lot of space. And so I prefer this torque wrench here, which is a little 1/4 incher torque wrench, T-Cron. I'll put a link down below. But once you get that one, you're going to have to rotate it up like so. And then we will go ahead and torque the other one. Now you are officially past the hardest part of this job. And now we got to put in some camshafts, a couple other parts, strap it together, and then we're actually going to see if this thing works. I hope to God it does. So stay with me. Look at that. Torqued and ready to go. Again, make sure to check your torque settings to make sure you get the right torque, because you don't want to have to do this again. All right, folks, now we are to the point we can actually reinstall the camshaft. At this point, you can either reinstall the original one, or if you're having problems, as we discussed, I'll put some links below. Just please do your own research and get the correct camshaft. So before we do this, don't forget, if you took out your lifters, these guys here, we got to reinstall them, and lifters lift a lot. They move around, so make sure to put plenty of lube on there. Again, I like the Whirlpool Max lube or whatever lube you got hanging out, and just slide them back in the holes. Super easy. Make sure to lube up the tips right there, because that's where the camshaft lobes bump on them really, really fast, and lift your lifters and everything else. See if I get it in the right hole. There's 3 holes down here, folks. Oh, and they get awfully slippery. Let's see there. Come on. Get in the hole. There we go. All right. Yeah, just slide them all the way up in there like so. You can see I got 2 lifters. Next, for the camshaft itself, you want to make sure before you install it, again, lube up, especially the lobes here, because those are going to be high RPM, and just kind of, I don't know. I like lube too much. And then also get the tip right there, because that's going to slide in and be turning super quick. So when you install it, you're going to look down there, you're going to see the hole in there, and it's just going to slide in. But hang on. Before you do this, this is a very, very crucial step. So let me get my zoom going here. Hang on with me. You'll notice on your camshaft there's a dot, and there is a corresponding dot on your crankshaft. Those two must line up with each other. That is what times this engine. It's very simple but very, very important. You can see right there, that one's going to be sliding down. They should be directly next to each other. Super easy. All right, and then we got our oil slinger. You're going to slide that dude back on there, and when you do it, it's just going to press on there. You're going to have that tip right there, and it's going to be, don't go like that, go like that. And it's just going to, well, you want it to, come on, come on. The old oil slinger, she's a little slippery. All right, so just like that. Again, make sure your dots line up. Make sure your lifters are in there. Your oil slinger is installed, and next we can actually strap this thing back together. Now, a pro tip I have found out while you're working on this, look at this. I've been using a wooden ring. This is a workout ring I got off Amazon for like $7, and it has done amazing. It allows me to turn this motor, and it keeps it off the fan right there. So I highly suggest while you're doing this, put a ring like this. I'll put an Amazon link below, or an old tire, something, so you're not damaging that. So, all right, enough of my rambling. Let's go ahead and get the cap and slide her back on. All right, folks, before we strap our engine back together, we need to start cleaning things, and cleaning things very, very thoroughly. This is the engine pan, which I'm gonna start with. Now, this isn't connected to the engine right now, so we really can get in here and do a deep cleaning. First thing I would do is take a look at your oil filter screen. That's this guy right here. This is your oil pump, and it pumps out through this screen. I can see my screen's pretty dang clean because we changed the oil down here. But just make sure that's clean. If it's not, you can see this little ring, it'll just pop out. It's in a groove there. Pop it out, clean it out. I'm not gonna mess with it. We're gonna move on since I am clean. All right, now, gaskets. Now, gasket cleaning is an art. I grew up gasket cleaning with just flathead screwdrivers. Now, I've got a couple tools of choice. First thing I'm gonna go with just a sharp blade against there, and we're gonna get off the main chunks of the gasket like so. Pretty much anything like that. And then once you get off the big chunks, what I like to do is go in with one of these guys. This is a Scotch-Brite on a drill, and this stuff does amazing. Let's look over here, see if I can get you a close-up. So you just go like this. Wow, this stuff's really stuck on. Then as you see right there, it gets super, super clean. Just an awesome tool. I'll put links to Amazon down below. They're really easy. You just need a battery powered drill, and it comes with a little connector. So I'm gonna go around and clean all of this, and then once I get the gasket off, do the gasket first, then clean all the grime, because you're gonna have some gunk and grime. And when you clean it, just make sure to use some carb cleaner. I'm a big Merriman B12 type fella. So let me get that cleaned up, and then we'll flip it to the other side, and we'll talk about the main seal down through that hole. So stay with me. Look how pretty and clean that sucker is. I tell you what, those Scotch-Brite pads on a drill do an amazing job. They just eat gaskets and make it super, super clean. See, I did that around the sides. And then on the inside, I started cleaning it, but then I said, screw it. I just got the pressure washer and I hit the inside with it. Got all the grime and the gunk out of there. If you have a pressure washer, it is great on these engine parts that are off the engine. You can really get in there and clean it. If not, rags and cleaner does great. So what we're going to look at next, I want you to go ahead and flip this sucker over. And on the bottom, we're going to look at this seal here. That is the main oil seal for the engine. This is what comes out the bottom of the motor. Their crankshaft slides through here, spins on that, and this keeps all the oil inside the engine. A very, very important seal. I'm gonna go ahead and replace it. I've got one from my engine seal kit I bought. I'll put a link below to the kit, and also if you just want the seal, it's just cheap assurance. You don't have to do this. You can go ahead and use the old one if the old one wasn't leaking, but we're gonna replace it. Now, before I start prying the sucker out, I want you to look at something. Look at the placement of the seal. If you look here real close, you can do Look at that. It's not pressed all the way down there. There's a little gap right there and a little gap right there. So I just want you to note how far it isn't pressed in there, because we want to push it in just about the same amount. We don't want to make it flush with that part right there, because I think it allows a little bit of oil to slide into that seal. So what we're gonna do next, we're gonna pry the seal out. Just anything is gonna work, hopefully. All right, come on. Well, that sucker is in there tight, 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 tight. Interesting. I didn't think this would be my big problem of the day. So we're gonna go ahead in here and do a little, there we go. A little hammer whacking is always helpful. So we've got it out, and if you look in there, there's a little dirt, a little grime. So we're gonna go ahead and clean it, make it nice and aesthetic. That's the new word of the day. All right. It's always good to make sure everything is super clean, especially working on engines, because if you get any grime or gunk inside there, it's never a good thing. And go ahead and use your finger, make sure you're nice and smooth before we put our new seal in. Now, the new seal, I want you to look at it. All right, it's got, on the inside, it's got a little lip. It presses down and it presses down in here. Now, before you go, I like to put a little bit of grease. I'm just using marine bearing grease, just whatever grease you've got, and put a little bit on the inside of the seal right there. I got this out of an old Kawasaki book, and it's just something I always do. Put some grease on the inside, and then we'll put a little bit on the outside just to help her slide on in there. All right, now when you're sliding it in, hang on, let me get my zoom right. You're gonna press it in there with your hands, but you're gonna have to use something to press it in. Now, I suggest if you have a vise, that is always your best route, but since most of you probably do not have vices, today we're gonna go with the old school route. We need something round that's gonna push on the outside of the seal in order to press it in. And what is the perfect thing? Well, it's the old seal, because the old seal we can whack on and press on and push her down in there. So I suggest taking the old seal, that's gonna press on the outside, and then get something flat, usually a piece of wood, to go ahead and put on the top, because that way it gives you even pressure across the seal. And then just start evenly pressing it in, slowly, slowly, slowly. You know, occasionally take it out, see where you're going with it. I can see here, we're a little heavy on that side, so you wanna whack it a little more on the other side. There we go. This sucker is sliding in. I can see it is a tight, tight seal. All right, again, and just keep watching it. Take your time as you whack it. Oh, yeah, no comment there. All right. You see, we're pressing her down in here. Dang, I think we're getting pretty close. I'm gonna give a little more of a whacking job over here. This is not an exact science, folks. You just want to press it down where it's below that little lip. I think we're just about there. Yep. All right, and that is how you install a crankshaft oil seal. Pretty slick. You can see right there. The big deal is to get it past that lip and make sure it's on the flat part. So with that, we're gonna go back to the main engine. That way we can stop messing with this thing, and I don't know, stay with me. All right, now we are ready to prep our oil pan. You're like, Mower Mike, we already prepped it. We got our new fancy oil seal pressed in there. Yes, sir, but we've got to look at the other side. Now, again, I have got it perfectly clean with all sorts of scrubbing and carb cleaner. I even used a pressure washer, and she is looking good. But for the gasket, now, in theory, yes, you could just throw this gasket, and I'll put a link to the gasket set I'll use down below, but you really need a new gasket here, and you have some options. You could either put silicone all the way around it on both sides, which To me, that makes a bit of a mess, because if we silicone both sides of this gasket, we press it on there, the next time you have to take this thing off, it is that much harder. So what I like to do is put silicone just lightly on the oil pan side itself, because next time you take it off, this should come off easily because it is just on the oil pan side. When the silicone is on the engine side, it makes it much harder to take off and much harder to clean. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this, again, a very light sheen on this guy. Now, in the professional world, well, they call this stuff pookie. And when you put too much pookie on your gasket mating surface, it gets into the engine and it spreads in there, and you do not want this stuff going in there, and then you get called a pookie monster by your father-in-law. Yes, I was very big on silicone. Now, my favorite type of silicone is the Resirol. You know, it's kind of hard to see, but I really like this stuff. It's super cheap on the Amazon. Again, all right, so we got our pookie lined up. Make sure to line up the gasket correctly the best you can, and then we're just going to lay it on here. And make sure you get your holes lined up, and just press it down gently. And we're going to let it set up overnight. That way I don't have any silicone that's going to want to stick to the other side. So, all right, so come back and we are going to strap this thing back together finally, I promise. All right, folks, I'm going to ramble on about one more thing before we slide on the engine cover and slide the shaft through the hole. All right, so you remember this guy here? This is what fell off when I pulled this off originally, because when I pulled it off, it was just sitting right here in a little slot in the camshaft. What this is the oil pump shaft, and it slides in there and it sits in that guy there. And the other end slides up through here. If you look at this, perfect little thing for the other end. And what it does is that it just spins the oil pump. This is the actual oil pump here. So just to keep things more simple, but while I slide this thing back on, I'm gonna go ahead and remove the oil pump. That way it'll give us a clearer picture. Now, if I did this again, I would have removed this before I pulled this off the engine. That way you can remove the oil pump and then actually pull this out through this hole with a little magnet, and that would have just made it a little cleaner. But for now, we're gonna leave it off. I'm gonna slide it back on, and then hopefully that shaft goes back through the hole where she belongs. So, all right, I think we're ready for the big moment. I'm gonna go ahead and lube up the shaft here, and we're gonna get ready. So the next step, we're going to slide the oil pan back on the bottom of the motor. As you see, the motor is inverted. Before you do this, it's very important to lube right here, because you want lots of lube where that crankshaft seal is gonna go over. So again, I'm using the Royal Purple Max Tough lube. You can use oil, whatever there is. Just go ahead and lube that sucker up. And also make sure your little oil slinger here is where it's supposed to be, where that nub is pushed on there. And we're gonna have to be really careful as we slide this sucker back on here. So let me get everything set up for the action shot and stay with me. All right, folks, after all that prep, we are finally ready to slide this sucker down here. We've got a beautiful shot for you. So we got everything lubed up. We got a camshaft in there. We got everything set just right. So when we lower this sucker down, again, make sure you got your gasket. We got our gasket pressed on there. And just take your time and go very slow and make sure you do it the right direction, like so. And as you slide it down there, just go really slow and line things up. There we go. And then you're gonna hit the actual seal itself. It's gonna have to press over there. What I've got a little pick, because you don't want this seal flaring out on you. You wanna make sure it slides in there like it should. Come on. Come on, get on there. That is a new, fresh seal, super tight. See, it's... Well, folks, it slammed home. All right, then you're just gonna go around and make sure everything's lined up. It looks like it did. Make sure nothing flared out. You can see our excessive amount of lube did its job. And then we're just gonna go ahead and put the bolts on. So let me find my bolts I took off about 2 weeks ago, and we're gonna bolt her back on. All right, folks, before we install the screws on the cover, I wanna make sure we can get this oil pump shaft into the hole. So I'm gonna put a little lube on her, as usual. May need a new can of lube after all this. And slide it in the hole. Let's see. And then what you're going to do, you're going to turn it till you feel it slide down in there. And that's way you know it's actually in there. And then, oh, come on. Then you're going to go ahead and lube up the outside one, like so. And hopefully this goes as planned. I'm going to put a lube on the inside guy. And if we can, you may have to turn it a bit. Come on, I hope this works for me. Nice. You're gonna see it, it's all gonna be flush. You'll be able to see it slide down in there. And then just install your cover with the itty bitty bolts. They're not gonna need much torque. At the end of this video, I'm gonna do some pictures of all the different torque settings for the various motors. But now on this guy here, all right, we got it all on here. We got my bolts in there. Next, we need to torque the bolts. A very important step to make sure this sucker doesn't leak. But look at the manual. There is a torque setting. So depending on what type of engine you got, you can see figure 9 has the horizontal shaft motors. Figure 10 vertical shaft. So mine is a big figure 10. You can see you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9. Figure 11 is some vertical shaft models, and then figure 12. So you can just take a snapshot of whichever one of these is yours. There you go. Just match the pattern and then follow the torque sequence on whatever your engine is. And the torque in the back of the sucker is only 100 inch-pounds. So that is not very much torque at all. So you can see I got my electronic torque wrench Craftsman. This is my go-to. See, she's well used. I'll put a link down below to this bad boy. But if we just, and also I did put a drop of thread locker on there. Make sure to use the removable, the red one. It comes out blue on there. See, that's, I mean, it's not much torque at all because you don't want this whole thing to flex. So I'm gonna go around and torque this together, and then we will either finish this video or go to the next stop if you're hanging on. All right, who is excited about putting on a head and a head gasket? Well, this guy is here too. That's been a long process. But before we slap her on there, let's go through a couple of checks. First, cleanliness, very, very important. And you can see I put a lot of work into this head, into cleaning it. And you can see all the surfaces are perfectly clean. I went through there with my Scotch-Brite, got it all off. Also on the head itself, I got the combustion chamber clean, valves are clean. I took the valves off, cleaned everything. Did a valve job, which is essentially lapping, grinding the valve so you have a good seal. Now, I am not gonna go through that whole process with the head. I've got another video. I'll put a link down below on how to clean the head, take it apart, lap the valves, get everything just right. But this one, we're just gonna focus on the head gasket itself. Now, inside the cylinder, a good check, because we wanna make sure everything's super clean. Go ahead and make sure all that's clean, clean it out with a carb cleaner. And another trick is that you can spin the motor and let the piston come up and then back down. And what it's gonna do, it's gonna leave a little ring in there. And that way, because the piston ring pushes up, you can go ahead and catch what you may have left as far as dirt and grime and whatnot, and just wipe it off. So now we've got a clean cylinder, and also put a little lube in there. I got a little assembly lube in there. Don't need a whole lot, engine oil, whatever, just to make sure she's gonna slide good for you. All right, we are lubed up. And one note on the lube, go light, because you really don't want any lube coming down here onto the gasket surface itself, because that could screw things up. All right, now when it comes to head gaskets, I am a big believer of using cheap Chinese crap off Amazon, but when it comes to internal engine parts and gaskets, especially head gaskets, I do suggest the Briggs and Stratton OEM gaskets. I'll put a link down below. I bought a whole engine gasket kit that's a Briggs and Stratton because it is very difficult to change these out. Not like a carburetor, you can just swap it on and off. Let's make sure. So the head gasket, there's a couple of little dowel pins right there, and you're just gonna slide it on there. Easy breezy. Now, with this head, I went ahead and removed the rocker arms because I'm gonna install the push rods and the rocker arms that show the valve lash here in a minute. But if you left them on there, go ahead, I suggest just setting this at top dead center. We'll have the piston all the way up, and then you can install your head and just line up the 2 push rods through your holes to sit on the rockers. All right, that's besides the fact. Let's go ahead and slide this sucker on here. Super easy, in theory, as long as you can find the hole. All right, it is on there, and then you're just gonna start getting the bolts in here. So let me go ahead and I'm gonna start the bolts, and then we're gonna talk about how to torque them down, which is a very important step. We're getting close to bam bam time, hang on. All right, let's go ahead and get this sucker torqued down so I can get back to mowing. But of course there's a trick to it. On the head bolts, to get them to torque properly, I highly suggest using some sort of fastener assembly lubricant like this ARP lube, Ultra Torque, and that way you know you're going to get the right torque, because sometimes the heads of these bolts get a little nasty, and a little lube down there is perfect. But if you're going to do it, you do need to use the right stuff, which would be some sort of, I don't know, bolt torque lube. I'll put a link down below. All right, now I'm just cinching this thing on there to get it close, because next we are going to torque it down. Now, when you torque a cylinder head, remember, cylinder head is aluminum, torquing to aluminum, so you want even pressure pushing down. That's why you have to torque it in a very certain sequence. And see right here, we're gonna have to torque it 1, 2, 3. You wanna go kind of in a different pattern. And also, you don't want to torque it all the way to the final torque. All screws approximately 1/3 of the torque value, then 2/3, and then the final torque. And we're going to a final torque of 220 inch-pounds, which is about 19 foot-pounds, or I think 18 Newton meters. I'm not even sure what that is. So let's go ahead and start torquing. We're going to start down here. And when it says 1/3 of the torque, I just kind of give it a, you know, kind of tight, but not real tight. So go around there, and we're just gonna go in this pattern all the way around. And I'm gonna do this third thing, and we're gonna skip that on the camera just so we can go to the final shot of me torquing these down. Hang on with me. All right, so I've gone around in my crisscross pattern, and I did my 1/3 of a torque and then a 2/3 of a torque, which is kind of tight, little tighter, and now we're gonna do the actual torque. So this is very important to do the torque sequence. See, 1, 2, 3. Don't forget the guys down underneath there. And then 4, 5. And I'm gonna go ahead and put some different details on the motors from this book down below, but I do highly suggest you actually buy this Briggs and Stratton book, because it's been pretty damn handy, and it does cover most of the Briggs and Stratton engines. 7, last guy up here, oh, right there, 8. All right, so we are all torqued down. All right, next I'm gonna go try to find where I left my push rods and all my valve parts, because we need to reinstall the rocker arms and get our valve lash set. And after that, we should be getting pretty dang close, so stay with me. All right, we've got our head strapped on. Now we get to install the push rods. Push rods are these metal rods. They slide down in here. Deep inside the engine, you have your lifters, and that's what these guys are gonna slide on. The lifters are bouncing off the camshaft, pushing these guys up and down, which you're gonna push on your rocker arms and shut and open your valves. And it's gonna make beautiful music all in sync. That is the shortest engine tutorial you will ever have. All right, so your push rods. If you have a Briggs and Stratton engine, Most likely there's going to be a shiny one and a dull one. Your shiny one is aluminum. The dull one is hardened steel. Why they did this, I don't know. But it does cause a lot of issues where, especially the aluminum one can be bent. So before you put these back in there, I stress, roll them on something flat. Make sure they are straight. If they are not, just buy a new one. You get them on Amazon. All right, so when we install them, we're going to be sliding down them in here. Some of you are going to have push rod guides like that, and where they're going, let's see if we can zoom in. If you can look way up in there, that is your lifter. There's a little tiny cup, and that's what we're aiming for, and with these guides it makes it a little easier. So, all right, so you've got your aluminum one. Now the aluminum one is going to go on your intakes. Your intake's gonna be the bottom one, not connected to your exhaust. So just kind of wriggle it around in there. There you go. It's gonna be the deepest you can get. Slide that in there. And then we're gonna get our exhaust one, which I assume it's steel because it gets hotter. Slide that guy in there. All right. Now we can install our rocker arms, but make sure you have your valve little caps. If you have them, not all engines are going to have these, but you just got to make sure they're on there and lube up the tips, all with lube. I have already done that. And these are your rocker arms. The little indentation nipple is going to go over your push rod. So it just slides on there like so. Hopefully we're not wobbling around too much. And then your little locker screws on. And what we're going to do at this point, I'm just going to hand tighten the little lockers, because in the next step, we are going to adjust the valves, which is very, very important. I suggest that no matter what. If you've had this head off, especially, I mean, anytime is a good time to adjust the valves. I do it, maybe once a year. So, all right, so we've got this set up. Voila, and that's how it's supposed to look. So I'm gonna grab some tools and we will get ready to adjust the valve lash. All right, now the first step, well, I guess this is the second step, is that we need to get the piston of the engine to what we call top dead center. That means it is at the very top of its stroke. It's as far out as possible, as close as possible to that cylinder head. Now we want that because that is when the combustion chamber is closed. As you see the valves here, when it's at top dead center on the compression stroke, that means these valves are shut, meaning the rockers are going to be loose. And when they're shut, they're all the way up. They're not being pushed on, and that is when you adjust your valve clearance right there, your little valve lash, because you want that little space to make sure it is not pushing down that valve at the wrong time or too much, which loses compression, and we have all sorts of other issues. All right, so to get it at top dead center, take your spark plug out and shove something in the hole. You guys should be familiar with that. Just put it in there, and you want, well, first of all, put anything in the hole. I know some people say don't put anything sharp, but trust me, you ain't gonna hurt that piston. Just make sure it's clean. So now to get to the top dead center, you want to rotate the top of the engine. Essentially, you're going to turn the fan at the top, which is going to turn the whole engine. And you're going to feel it until it pushes all the way out, as far out as possible, out of that piston, out of the spark plug hole. All right, and you're going to have actually two top dead centers. I can see right here, this is not the right one because we're still putting pressure on the exhaust on one of the valves there, because that's on the intake stroke. So you want to rotate, these are both not loose, you want to keep going another stroke. Turn it all the way down, and it's going to go down, and then all the way back up. There you go. And they're both loose, because on the compression stroke, top dead center, these should be both shut, which means pushed all the way up. They should not be pushed down, and that is when we adjust our valves. Now, per the book, it says a 1/4 inch past top dead center. So you can actually turn it and let it come down just a touch, and that would be your 1/4 inch past top dead center. So, all right, I'm gonna go wrestle some dogs who are attacking my dogs right now, and then grab some feeler gauges, and we'll get the sucker adjusted. So we've got the engine set at top dead center, which is the position we need to adjust the valves. Now I'm gonna make one note before we actually start wrenching. When you do this, you want to make sure this engine is cooled off. You don't want to do it after it's been running and it's all hot, because it expands the metal and it's going to throw off all your different clearances. All right, so the first thing we want to do is look at our tools. All right, so one thing you're going to need for sure is a feeler gauge. Now, feeler gauge has all these little metal, different thickness gauges right here, and it's going to be used to figure out the clearance between your rocker arm and your valve. You see, that was a little fat. So on these Briggs and Stratton engines, if you have one that's a vertical shaft, in other words, meant for a riding lawnmower, pretty much all of them on the intake will be 0.003 inch to 0.005 inch clearance. On exhaust will be 0.005 to 0.007. So because I'm lazy, I always go with a 0.005 and just use that on both of them. So I've got my feeler gauge here, 0.005 or 0.13 millimeters. All right, so to actually adjust the valves, what we need, well, first to describe it, outside you've got a rocker nut, which is a 5/8 nut, and then on the inside you've got a set screw, which is a T15. Now to adjust it, you want to loosen up that set screw, because the set screw is what tightens it all down. So you're going to loosen that up, and then to adjust the clearance, you take your feeler gauge, it's like 1/2 inch clearance, and then you start just tightening the outer nut. You're going to tighten until you feel it. You know, you don't want it that tight where it's just hanging on. You want it where you can move it, but there's still resistance. So when you get it in a good spot, like so, I like to go ahead and you're going to put a wrench on the outside of it and stay out of the camera angle. All right, and you want to hold it exactly where you had it. Don't move it at all, and then you're going to take your T15 and tighten the inner set screw. And when you come back, go ahead and check it, make sure you didn't make it too tight. Oh, that's perfect. You want where there's just a little resistance, but not too much. And on that inner set screw, the torque setting is 45 inch-pounds, which is barely, not even 4 foot-pounds. So if you want to torque it, go ahead. Just make sure to hold it. There you go. Doesn't take much torque. And then it's that easy, folks. Your valves are set. So go ahead and do that one. Do the exhaust. All right, there is one more oil seal on this engine I'm going to address. We've already addressed the main two ones, but on the dipstick tube itself, your dipstick tube is going to be very, very dirty. Make sure to clean the bottom real nice. There is an O-ring right here. And if you bought the engine gasket set that I suggest, which I will put the link down below, comes with a new O-ring. So go ahead and just slide it on there, because over time these get old and brittle and they get loose and this thing starts wobbling around. And also make sure to clean real good around your hole. Ooh, don't lose your thing in there. So, and then all it does is slide back in there like so. Pop in, and then the screws you're going to see when you screw the top back on, it's all going to firm up. So that is the end of the oil seals. Knock, knock. Is anybody still there? Anybody still awake after that? I mean, that's an 1.5 hour video. So if you're still here, I do appreciate you watching. I know that was a lot, but I had a lot of fun doing it. And just as a reminder, every tool I've used, I've got links down below. I also got my tool store there. So use those links to make sure you get the right tools. And also, I do highly suggest, if you're going to do this type of work, get the Briggs manual. Don't rely on my goofy amateur butt to teach you how to rebuild an engine. Because if you're doing that, you're in trouble. So with that, hey, let's see you next time, or I will see you next time. I can't even talk anymore. That was a lot of YouTubing. So till next time, Mower Mike's out. Have a good one.